Hey folks, many times I'm asked to do a video on advanced landing gear design, so I decided to pick 4 of my favorite aircraft and do 4 separate videos. So this is video number 2 of the series. And if you're here to see my Aerobike ultralight update, I hopefully will have one by this weekend, so please stay tuned. And I won't be covering my Brewster Buffalo landing gear design because I just did a video on that, and I'll put a link in the description below to that, but I won't be touching any on the Brewster because I just did a full video on it. Even though the 1919 Emmaselle I has a fixed landing gear, it was a 73-pound airplane and had to have some pretty beefy landing gear to work. I have discussed a lot in past videos landing gear design, and one of the most important things is when you start building colossal size airplanes, or ginormous scale airplanes like I call it, and you get over that 40-pound mark. I mean, like I said earlier, this plane weighs 73 pounds. And when you think that I got over 1,350 flights on it, and all I had to do is maintenance, I never really ever had a landing gear failure on it. Even on a really hard all-field landing I had one time, it didn't damage the airplane, and it didn't really damage the landing gear much. And when you think about flying this airplane, it flies on the wing, folks. It is not an overpowered airplane at all. It had about 68 watts a pound, and if you know anything about electrics, that's not a lot. It's enough. But when you think of flying this airplane, and we all don't have perfect takeoff and landings every flight, so we have to build landing gear strong enough that if we, basically screw up, that we're not going to hurt the airframe. It's one thing to bend an axle. It's another thing if you maybe tweak a wheel, but you don't want to damage your airframe. At least to me, that's one of the most important things, about flying model airplanes. So let's dive first into the design of this airframe. Basically, everything was bought from a hardware store, or it was light plywood I had from a shipping crate. That actually came from Rome, Italy, that had a big entertainment hoist in it because I work in the entertainment industry with automation and lighting. But the thing is that when you build a airframe, you have to think about the main gear and then the tail wheel. And on this, it ended up being a tail skid. In this picture, I just put a tail wheel on it so I could move it around as I was building the airplane. As you know, everything is weight to me when I designed these, and I knew this was going to be a pig. So I used an aluminum 6061 T6 aluminum tube as the axle, and then I was going to use bungee cords as the suspension. And this ultimately worked out really, really good, folks. I mean, 1,350 flights on it without any problem. The tail skid original design was a disaster. I had just laminated some thin plywood, cut a block, and glued it onto the tail. And, in hindsight, this is pretty embarrassing because this didn't last hardly any time at all before it started splitting and breaking. And it was just not a great day when I designed that right there. As you know, I like to talk about mock-ups a lot and how important they are. This was the very original mock-up, which was really a bad idea because there was no suspension in this. And as you build airplanes, sometimes you start realizing, especially at the mock-up level, what's going to work. So I ended up with a bungee system, which I'm going to get into a little bit more in just a second. But I really want to stress to everybody how important it is to build a mock-up and set it on the ground, bench fly it, and just have an imagination of what could go right or what could go wrong with your design. In this picture, there's a lot going on. That center post going vertical there is the hard point for my wings flying wires. There was not a spar going through the center of this fuselage, folks. So the wings were held on by flying wires. And when you start thinking of how I like to use aircraft cable to also create structural rigidity by putting things in tension on this landing gear, the aircraft cable is something you should always keep in the back of your mind for a landing gear like this. Now, the bungees was the suspension, but the aircraft cable kept this gear from twisting in the yaw axis, if that makes any sense to y'all. So when you look at this picture right here, this landing gear had to take 73 pounds if I flubbed up a landing. And the bungees could be changed very easily, weekly, monthly, yearly. But I only had to change the bungees once because they started to dry rot. The wheel and tire came off my daughter's baby stroller, and actually my wife came home one day and saw the stroller sitting on a concrete block with no wheels on it. And I said, look, my daughter's outgrown the stroller, and these wheels and tires are perfect for it. They were heavy, folks. So this is one of the problems with an airplane this big. These wheels and tires, added 4 pounds to the airplane. It was ridiculous how heavy they were, but they were perfect for the size I wanted. And they lasted the 5 years, 1,350 flights that I flew this airplane. I'm going to be Mr. Obvious for a minute, but the reason we fly our model airplanes is to have fun. Sure, we like to tinker with them. We like to mess with them. We like to do maintenance on them. But we don't want to go out the flying field and have a bad landing and have the plane not work the rest of the day. So I try to build everything as strong as I possibly can without just completely overbuilding everything. When designing a ginormous airplane, folks, one of the things to consider is the materials. Like I said earlier, I had 6061 T6 as the axle. I had 1/4 inch hardened steel as some of the hard points, and also the wood that made up the strut of the landing gear. So don't be afraid to make it strong, but always be monitoring how heavy the components you are making are. But it's better to be a little bit heavy and have a rugged airplane than have something that's going to fall apart. And as we wind this video down, I want to talk about the tail skid real quick. So the tail skid I ended up with was just absolutely just far out, folks. It was really a cool design. So I ended up doing a bungee on the tail skid, and this ended up lasting until I hangared the airplane. So just basic parts here, parts and pieces, folks. The actual skid itself, I laminated some plywood with carbon fiber toe in the middle of it, and it proved to just be rock solid strong. And I just don't know what else to say except this landing gear turned out perfect. Now, I didn't just invent this idea. I kind of stole this idea from some vintage World War I airplane tail skids. But this just worked perfect, folks. It was just, I don't know what to say. It was perfect. Rock on, folks. Thanks for watching my videos, and have an awesome day. Bye.